Our next guest represents Maryland's 8th Congressional District and was the lead impeachment manager. Please welcome to the show, Congressman Jamie Raskin. Thanks for being here, Congressman.
I'm delighted to be with you, Seth. Thanks for having me.
So many were introduced to you as the lead impeachment manager. Many from both sides of the aisle said you did a great job and that the defense maybe didn't. Were you surprised by the preparation level of Donald Trump's legal team during the impeachment?
Well, let's see. We don't speak ill of fellow members of the bar, but when Mr. Castor finished that very long-winded opening, something ran through my mind that I'd heard in a science class when I was in college, a professor who quoted a physicist who read someone else's paper and said, "That's not even wrong." I kind of felt like he had never even addressed the issues in the case or the facts of the case. And so it wasn't like he got up and struck out. He just never really found the stadium.
Now, the one argument that can be made for that approach is he was probably fairly confident that his client was not going to get impeached. You went into it maybe a little more confident than that. I have heard you say you thought you were going to win with a unanimous Senate vote, 100-0, voting to impeach. Voting to convict, I should say.
Well, yeah, I thought that the evidence in the case was so overwhelming that a Senate that was doing its job of rendering impartial justice, which is the oath that they swore to uphold, could do nothing other than vote to convict. And as you say, he was already impeached by the House. So we had the strongest bipartisan majority in the House in American history for impeachment. And then it came to the Senate. And I thought that we would get to 100-0, that the bottom would just fall out on the president's defense. But there were obviously people who had decided at the beginning that they were going to vote to acquit him and hang their hat on this technical defense that he couldn't be tried even after leaving office, even though he was impeached for actions that he undertook while he was in office, which has been the traditional American approach going back to the very beginning of the Constitution.
Do you think that the results would have been different in the vote to convict had it been a blind vote where people would not have known how each senator made their choice?
Yes, and a lot of Republicans were saying that to me, that if they had made the decision to structure the rules of the Senate differently, if it had been a secret ballot, which is basically what you've got when a real jury meets. When jury meets, the public doesn't know who's voting in which direction. And so if they had decided to do the same thing, I think that would have made a difference. I also kick myself, Seth, because I wish that I had moved at the beginning to do something they hadn't even considered, which was to keep them from sitting in partisan blocks. You know, they had the Republicans over on the right side and the Democrats over on the left side. They should have been seated alphabetically or something else, because it encouraged them to keep thinking of it in partisan terms. And the whole trick is to get them to render an impartial verdict. And that word impartial is a lot like nonpartisan.
Obviously, you know, we're watching via the cameras, and you made a very riveting case. Did you feel as though you had the attention of the senators when you were making it?
We had the attention of every senator who was paying attention. And the reason I say that is because I looked out often and saw not a majority at all of the Republicans, but a handful of Republicans who were studiously refusing to look at the camera when we showed footage of the violent insurrection, the attacks on the police officers, the people chanting, hang Mike Pence, traitor, traitor, traitor. They were essentially closing their eyes to it. And for that, I won't forgive any of those senators. I mean, it's one thing to get to the end and say, I wasn't persuaded by your case, or I think jurisdictionally, even though this is a radically novel argument, the president can't be tried once he's left office. But it's quite another to say, I'm not even going to look at the facts of the case. So those people I'm not going to forgive for a long time.
Obviously, they probably don't teach in law school how to make a case to a jury who are also witnesses to the crime, and one could even argue co-conspirators. How do you approach laying out a case to a room full of people who were there and saw it with their own eyes?
Well, you would have thought that that would make our job a lot easier because it's like getting a jury full of people who were there when the crime was committed, and the crime was committed in the courtroom. Because we were meeting in one of the places, you remember, that the insurrectionists stormed and took over. They had their feet up on all these people's desks. They were rifling their belongings. And if you've got any kind of professional or democratic self-respect at all, you would think you'd go in saying, you know, the president's going to pay for this if he's the one who got this thing started, which of course he did. So I was startled that 43 of them were willing to just look the other way and say, no, this guy's got too much power in our party. And even though if you're with Mitch McConnell, we made an overwhelming case, we proved our case on the facts, still they were going to claim that the president could not be tried once he's left office, thereby creating what we were calling the January exception. You can get away with whatever you want once you hit January, a coup, a rebellion, an insurrection, lining up members of Congress, taking people hostage. I mean, it's an absurdity when you think about it. And I quoted, Voltaire, who said, anybody who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And I think that captures pretty well the whole course of our history over the last few years. I mean, Donald Trump really was convincing people somehow he had won the election when he lost by more than 7 million votes. It was a landslide on his own terms in the Electoral College. And yet there's still people walking around like zombies in Congress today saying that Donald Trump won the election.
Obviously, to pick up something like being the impeachment manager, that requires a great deal of patriotism to take a job like this. This was a time, and we want to pass along our condolences. You tragically lost your son last year, and to take up this very difficult job that obviously required a lot of your time, focus, and energy, was it important for you to channel that grief into something that mattered as much as this?
I think so. My son, Tommy, who was in his second year at Harvard Law School, was a great champion of the rule of law and the rule of law as an instrument of justice and democracy. And I felt him very much next to my heart and in my chest over the course of the trial. And for me, it was important. I just kept thinking, I'm not going to lose my son on the last day of 2020 and lose my country in 2021. We have got to establish that this is completely off limits conduct and behavior. We can never allow anything like that to happen to us again, to have a president who basically incites a violent attack to overturn an election in order to install himself in office. And so I felt Tommy with me, as well as my daughters, Hannah and Tabitha and Sarah, my wife, my whole family, and all of my colleagues. And as you know, Seth, we had just a remarkable team of impeachment managers, and they will be my brothers and sisters forever after what we went through there.
Well, it's really, we thank you for what you put into the historical record, and thank you so much for making time for us today. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate your having me, Seth. Best to you.